Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Gears of War 5. I played it on the Xbox One because, you know, it's a Microsoft exclusive. So let's get into the story. You start out playing as JD, but after not too long, you play as Kate. And you play as Kate for the majority of the game, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed it because it kind of switched things up. It gave you a different perspective of what's going on in the world, and it gave you a different perspective of characters like Dell and JD and, you know, everyone else, quite frankly. I also like the new character they introduced, Foz. He's kind of like Baird was in the original trilogy. He starts out as somebody you kind of don't really like so much, but he really grows on you. But what happens is the COG is rounding up the outsiders, not in a bad way, but because they realize that the Swarm has become such a great threat that, well, everybody needs to come together on this one. And beyond that, Kate finds out some really crazy shit and some questions from the original trilogy get answered. I really just enjoyed the story. I liked that they tied it into the previous trilogy really well by answering some questions that were left from that. I like what they did in general with this story. You got a lot of character growth. Honestly, Gears 4 for me, while I enjoyed the game overall, I felt the story was, you know, it was there, it was a little weak, but I definitely felt like Gears of War 5 has one of the strongest stories in the entire game franchise. I say that just because it does so much with character growth. It tells you all sorts of new information. It's just really well done. As for the audio in the game, it's really good. The voice acting is phenomenal. I think everyone was really well cast. The new guys, the old guys, everyone is well done in this. I just really enjoyed that. But even going beyond that, all the other things, the guns still sound great. The creatures, the swarm sound awful, like they come straight out of a nightmare. And of course the music in this game is wonderful. I think it's really well done. When it comes up, you really feel the extra intensity of what's going on. Now, as for the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, this is where Gears of War 5 really differentiates itself from the rest of the games in the franchise. It really stands out on its own. Overall, it is still a cover-based third-person action shooter, but Gears of War 5 separates itself by adding some open world sections to the game, as well as some other small mechanics that the previous games didn't have. Starting with the small stuff, you have a bot that follows you around, and you can actually command it to be useful, unlike the bot in the previous trilogy. You can have your bot go and pick up items for you, ammo, all sorts of other things. You can also give your bot new abilities and upgrade him. The bot actually participates in combat by going around and tasing the enemy. You can have it take over enemies. You can have it create a shield. You can have it make you go stealth. It does a lot of really cool and interesting things, and you can upgrade it, which is really nice, and it adds a few more collectibles, and by a few I mean a lot. But there is one element that I briefly covered right there that I do have to address, and that is they added some stealth sections to the game. They're short and they can very easily devolve into just straight up combat, which is honestly something I kind of preferred. It's one of those things that I love. I do love stealth, but it's not necessary in every game. And quite frankly, the stealth worked well enough, but it really isn't something that I ever needed in a Gears of War game. Another small mechanic that I enjoyed was larger enemies, scions, carriers, etc. They now have a health bar, which is nice because fighting them before was kind of a pain in the ass because you just didn't know, but it's not something that was really necessary either. Then I would say one of the biggest mechanical changes to this game would be the skiff and the open world sections, which are basically Act 2 and 3. The skiff is like this wind-powered sand dune snow thing that you ride around on in what is fairly large areas. One thing I really liked about doing that was, it mixed things up quite a bit. It added a whole new element of exploration, not just an element to the world itself, which I enjoyed also because it showed you how big the planet of Sarah actually is. Not in like full scale, but you're exploring such huge areas. One thing I did really like about it was other games that add open world elements, it's just almost constant combat. They feel like if you're traveling, you need to be under attack, I guess. They didn't do that in this. When you stop and go to certain locations, then you are pretty much guaranteed to get into a firefight of some sort. But when you're just traveling between those locations, you're safe. And I enjoyed that because it also allowed for more exposition. It was something new. I don't know if it was entirely necessary, but overall, I gotta say I did enjoy it. I should say that I didn't feel it was necessary when I was first introduced to it, but by the time I was done with the second chapter of exploration using the skiff, I gotta say I liked it. Beyond that, a lot of the stuff works the same. They did add some other small mechanics, like a few new guns, some guns that have a secondary fire, stuff like that. Nothing exactly game-changing, but I do like what they've added and that they're now experimenting with the Gears of War formula. It is the 5th game, it really is time to grow. Now that addresses a bunch of the single-player stuff. As for the multiplayer, I gotta say, it's still good. I just have never been one who has been in love with the Gears of War multiplayer. I will say, with all the changes to Gears of War 5, I think this one works very well, and if you're into it, then you will enjoy it. Then you've got the Horde mode, which this is the best Horde mode. I definitely think that is true. I think everything that they've added, all the growth in Horde mode, really shows in Gears of War 5. And lastly, there's the new Escape mode, which it's there. That's about how I feel about it. I think it will get better, hopefully. I definitely think they can make it better. But for me, I just didn't really care that much about it. I had a lot more fun with Horde mode. As for the controls work very well. I had no complaints with their responsiveness, with the aiming. I didn't think that it was an inaccurate game. I think it worked very well. The one thing that was completely different was the melee has been changed. Now if you press B, whether you have the Chainsaw Lancer or anything, it's a knife-based melee attack, which that is fine, and it was just a little weird and hard to get used to. Now if you have the Chainsaw Lancer, you have to hold down RB, which is still the reload button as well, but if you're holding it down, it triggers the chainsaw. It also triggers the secondary fire mode in any weapon that has a secondary fire mode. It did take me a little bit of time to get used to that because it was a little weird, but by the time that was said and done, I really enjoyed it. And lastly, the graphics. It's beautiful. It's just a beautiful game. I mean, there's so much detail in this game. I love it. There were times where I was just swinging my camera around and got like a full face of Dell or JD in my camera. And the amount of detail that is in the gameplay models of those characters is fantastic. It's truly impressive. And then you have other small details like in Act 2 and Act 3 when you're in the snow or the sand. The skiff leaves a really good and believable trail in those mediums. When you're walking through the snow or the sand, it leaves a really good trail, a really believable trail. I was impressed by it. I mean, Gears of War has honestly graphically been one of the major standouts for the Xbox, and Gears of War 5 holds that up and just goes running with it. It was really impressive. So to wrap this up, this is definitely one of the best Gears of War games. It's far better than its predecessor. I'm not saying it's better than the original trilogy, but it is definitely better than Gears of War 4. Graphically, visually, gameplay, all the elements, I think they're there to make this one of the best in the franchise. So yeah, I recommend it. I don't have much else to say about it. I think it was excellent. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me who your favorite Gears of War character is? It's kind of hard for me to pick one because I've also been reading the books, so I have different thoughts on some of the characters than you might from just the games, which also you should go read the Gears of War books. I've liked them a lot. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.